This is Alex Fialho interviewing J. Carl Devine on March 25th, 2025 for the Miami AIDS Memorials Project and the Knowledge of AIDS Network. So thank you for making the time and speaking with me. Um,
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
yeah, so just interested to hear you tell us about a little bit about yourself and how you got started in working on AIDS and community memory work.
Okay, I'm J. Carl Devine. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm a native of Arcadia, Florida, but I'm a native Floridian. And I got involved in AIDS and HIV, I think, in 1987, because it was then that I was diagnosed with ARC. And that threw me for a loop. It developed into HIV and all of that later, but I was diagnosed in 87, and that's when I got involved.
And how did you get involved then? And that's, decades ago. So we'll talk more over the course of the conversation around your ongoing work. But how did you
Mhm.
first get involved? In what ways?
When I went to the doctor told me he wasn't going to charge me because I would be dead in a year. And I had to go to agencies that disrespected me. And so I created an agency called People of Color AIDS Coalition. And we learned how to do this work as we went along. We were discriminated against, treated very badly, very, very, very underfunded, but we survived for quite a few years. That was my beginning in this project.
Well, thank you for that work. How, yeah, maybe tell us a little bit more about founding and People of Color AIDS Coalition and what some of the work you all were doing was focused on.
In the beginning of this, I started in the 1990s when people of color came about, and we started working, and I started learning how to do this work from other people who had been doing this work. Uh, the National AIDS Task Force out of San Francisco would come and they taught us, and we went to different training sessions with them, teaching us how to mobilize our communities, how to get our communities involved in HIV and AIDS work, uh, and to deal with the stigma that went with that. And particularly in the Black community, there was a stigma that went with all of that. The religious community was on fire with we were burning in hell and all of that kind of stuff. So it was a very difficult time, but we survived it.
Were there people that you were working with or learning from that feel important to bring into the conversation?
Sure, I from that national task force, man, they were instrumental in introducing us to different people who were in the same boat as we, and so it became a camaraderie. Uh, uh, I found some brothers and a few sisters, and we some of us are still friends today. Those that are left, we still communicate. Chris Bates is one of my dear friends who God rest his soul. He taught me so much about the work that I do. At the majority of the people that we met at the beginning of this came from the National Task Force on AIDS Prevention out of San Francisco. Uh, William Bland and Harold Phillips and Galvin Newman. They were just awesome in their teachings, and Raymond Dumas. Uh, these guys were super in teaching us how to navigate the system of HIV/AIDS in our communities. Yes.
Wow. Thank you for naming those folks. And um, any particular moments, whether feeling like triumphs and accomplishments or maybe difficult times? I'm sure there was a lot of both of those. Anything stand out to highlight in this conversation?
Sure. We were one of the first agencies to own our own building.
Wow.
I wrote grants to purchase our building. We everything, one-stop shopping. You see during that period, as we see coming back today, there was a lot of discrimination. Some doctors didn't even want to touch us. There were people who didn't want to talk to us. And being black in a white dominated society, who do you go to about that level of discrimination?
Yeah, I definitely hear you. And how about the context of Florida? Were there specific histories or people that you were working with or rallying against? How does Florida?
We had to work with the Department of Health, the Bureau of HIV/AIDS, and Mr. Liberty is a white male, and we had to deal with that white maleness every day. We had to beg and scrape and borrow, and when we succeeded, they bothered us to the point of wanting us to do more with less. And so we had to make those levels of adjustments, you see. And we weren't getting a bunch of fundraisers in our community because that was a taboo, as is today. The stigma is still there. We just work around it as best we can.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit more to the stigma and how it was showing up?
It shows up in the way we're treated when we go into certain areas. You I was teaching some ministers in the ministerial alliance about HIV and AIDS because their members were dying. They were having funerals after funerals after funerals. And several of them got up and walked out when I started talking about it. You see that level of disrespect. And in some cases that level of disrespect still exists because some ministers still preach against God's willing. I am who I am because I was chosen to be.
Yes. Amen to that. And were there any moments that stand out that you felt you've highlighted the building? Uh, what address was that? Just curious if you remember, and where was that specifically, and how did it function in the community where it was located, and why did you pick or end up in that building? Some of the details there.
That building offered everything that we needed. It was a vacant building. It had sat for years. The I guess nobody wanted it. And then when I saw it and we wanted it and we worked with city officials here in St. Petersburg and county officials in Pinellas, and I got wrote two grants. They gave us the money and we bought the building.
Wow.
Took that experience to teach other people how to do the same thing in other areas. That you go to these politicians, you talk to these people who are in charge and let them know what you're doing. As a result of that work, when Governor Bush signed the budget for the state of Florida, we got $500,000 in that budget to address our needs.
Wow. What was the building like? Like, what was the first floor?
It was just it was one floor, one story, but it had several different, it was an old doctor's office.
Oh, wow.
It was an old dentist's office. They had all the dental areas in several different rooms where they made dentures and all of that stuff. So it was a huge building. But when we got in, we had a food bank in, a clothing bank. People could come in. It was a gathering place. We had a few thousand clients, you
Wow.
see. And we got the money to serve them. We had a doctor. one-stop shopping, man. We had a food bank second to none.
Wow. And remind me, what organization was the kind of umbrella organization, and how long did you all function?
People of Color AIDS Coalition was the umbrella.
Amazing. That's
We
what I
were
thought.
we were ourselves. We
Oh,
started because I didn't want to do this work. I just really did not want to do this work. I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict, and I was working at I forget what they call them now, a recovery uh, organization,
like a
and we had several clients that were HIV positive. So I had to wake them up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning and give them uh, their medication, you see. And when I saw what that medication was doing to them, I said, I'm not taking that shit.
I hear that.
And I didn't.
And how long did you work out of this building?
Oh, several years,
Amazing.
maybe 10, 12 years before we were forced to leave. The, people get jealous and they start lying on you. And that's what some of the administration wanted to hear. I had a full FBI investigation, man, from some of the lies that was told on me. Merely trying to save lives, merely trying to help people not have to go through some of the hardships that we saw them going through.
Yeah, sorry to hear. Can you talk a bit more about Banyan Tree Project and how, when that started and how that, I'll just note Kevin Magruder, formerly from Gay Men of Africa.
GMAD,
Yeah,
yes.
he suggested, I interviewed Kevin for this project and he said, you have to talk to J. Carl Devine. So here we are. Banyan Tree Project.
And it was during that time that I met Kevin. That's what I'm talking about, what the National Task Force did for us. They introduced us, they brought us together as a unit. And so we were able to meet and exchange ideas and teach each other as we went along dealing with this issue. We didn't get a lot of money from the drug companies, you see.
Yeah. When did Banyan Tree Project come into formation, and tell us how about that for organization and your role?
Banyan Tree came into to play in 2006.
Wow.
Next year will be 20 years.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Uh, Banyan Tree came about because we were doing housing, recovery housing. And I wrote a grant and did an MOA with the county. And so instead of sending people to jail, they would send them to Banyan Tree so that we could do a recovery program and help people change their lives. We did housing. So we fed them. They stay there from 3 months to a year. Some people stay longer. But I created a curriculum for them. And that's how Banyan Tree got started.
What is a banyan tree and why did it become the name?
A banyan tree is a large tree from Bangladesh, but they are here in St. Petersburg. And when you look at the whole of that tree, a lot of guys push their buggies in there. They would sleep. That's their house. And when I started reading on the history of it, I saw that Alexander the Great had brought his army under a banyan tree for refuge. And so I thought, wow, this is great. So I named it the banyan tree because I saw people living in the banyan tree.
Wow. And I mean, it's amazing to, when I was looking it up as well, to learn just about the range of services, as you've highlighted, housing, healthcare,
Yes.
community. Um, Tell us a little bit more about the thinking about, I mean, definitely need is there across these contexts, but a lot of times organizations can't pull that off to be able to provide that much care. So just curious about the work that you were able to do to make that possible.
At one point, we housed about 75 men.
Wow.
Uh, we also had HOPPA grants where people who were coming out of jails and prisons who were HIV positive, we could provide housing for them and case management to help them get back on their feet. Uh, we're doing for those people because we are those people.
Yeah.
We know what we need, and so we go about doing what to get that need met at by any means necessary legally.
Yes. Um, what has been the development over those 20, almost 20 years in terms of your role? Where is the organization at today? Just curious about the growth and your role within it.
It has changed. We no longer house people. The public defender for the Sixth Judicial Circuit owes me to this day $26,000. They refused to pay me because he said I didn't pay my rent. There was a big mess about it. I thought, how are you telling me how to spend my money? And I have provided the service for you. How do we address these powerful people? So Banyan Tree as a housing project diminished. It didn't exist. I had to recover from that financial loss. And but I took a job at AIDS Healthcare Foundation, AHF. They offered me a position as a mobilizer because I'm good at what I do and people already know me, you see. So it's easier for me to make contact with people and with other organizations. Who better to have on your side than J. Carl Devine?
Exactly. Um, what do you like about Banyan Tree and what about it makes you proud?
That it exists. We're the only Black same gender loving organization in the area
Yeah.
that do the services that we do. I'm working with some other groups now. I work with some young Black entrepreneurs trying to make a living, trying to change things. But it's difficult when you have to work on somebody else's job and then try to keep your agency going, you see. We work these other jobs so that we can survive ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for AHF though, man. They have been a real helpful to me.
How so?
I get to do the things I need to do in the community. Whenever there's a community event and stuff, people would call us and ask us if we would come and be a part of those events. We work with the NAACP. We work with the Pinellas Urban League. We work with churches and we roll street corners. You know, I talk to preachers these days. They understand where I'm coming from. And so it has changed in that way dramatically. And I'm most grateful for that change, that people are not as afraid as they once were.
Yeah, thank you. That's powerful to hear. And um, what challenges have you faced over the years? It's a big question, but with Ben,
Funding is always a challenge, brother. Funding is always a challenge, particularly when you're trying to help those who have none.
yeah, that makes sense. What were some of your intended audiences and who did you make it for? How was it received?
I made it for Black folks, but everybody enjoyed the fruits of our labor.
Hmm,
We did not discriminate. We didn't ask any questions like that because those questions were not necessary. You need help, we're here to help.
I hear that. And what's been the kind of reception of it over the years?
Oh man, I see people on the streets, they want to hug me and thank me, and I get cards, and it's it's it has made me a rich man as far as love is concerned.
Wow, that's beautiful.
You when people you have forgotten that you helped. Say, do you remember me? And I'm like, I'll tell them the truth. No, I don't remember you right now. You know, I'm 81 years old. I can't remember everybody that I have met over the years. So it's that's the joy of it all, knowing that I have helped somebody on the way and didn't want anything in return for that help.
Yeah, powerful.
Yeah.
What does Banyan Tree help us understand in terms of memory of AIDS? Whether it's individual memories of AIDS or community memory, collective memory, how does Banyan Tree contribute to AIDS and memory work?
Banyan Tree did 16 panels for the quilt in San Francisco.
Um,
We sent 16 panels to that quilt. And what we're doing now is creating panels for the local area to see. We want to keep AIDS and HIV in the forefront of people's mind because those are very high numbers in our area.
yeah.
You see, young Black men are still getting HIV. Black women are still getting HIV. And I find it interesting that after 30 years, here you won't change your behavior so that your life can go without having to take pills every day.
Yeah. And how about oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, like long-term surviving yourself with HIV has maybe if you're open to speaking a little bit about your process as now a long-term survivor.
I had to change everything about me. And but the thing that I'm finding that so many people don't want to make that change. They don't want to make a sacrifice. And I'm having to make that sacrifice. I've always had to make that sacrifice, you see. Beauty demands sacrifice. And life is beautiful. And so we have to make sacrifices. And it's just a matter of how you want to live your life. And I did not want to live my life on the streets.
You talked about some of those AIDS quilt panels. Are you open to sharing some names or folks who maybe are no longer with us and passed from AIDS that feel important to raise up in this conversation?
Sure. But I have one of my younger brothers died of AIDS. Joseph Sanders, we call him Joe. Uh, a graduate of Howard University. He lived in DC, but he died of AIDS. My best friend, El Marvin Gambrell, we, oh man, some of the stories I could tell you about what we did. But anyway, he was my mentor and dearest friend. We met, I was 4, he was 5, and we remained friends all of those years.
Maybe
And
you have one story that comes to mind?
I,
That's a lot.
I went to when I got out of the military, I went to San Francisco to the address that he had on the last letter I got from him from San Francisco. The lady said he has moved to New York,
Oh,
and I went to New York to find him, and I did.
amazing. Sweet. Um, how about St. Petersburg Pride? Does that feel connected to this conversation around AIDS and community work?
I live in St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg is a very, very funny city about that. Pride is accepted in St. Petersburg because there are a lot of people with money who deal with pride. In the Black community, that's not such the case, you see. So I have my issues with them too. For years and years and years, wouldn't there were no Blacks on that board of directors, even though we were in the community. And when they asked about it, oh, we can't find anyone appropriate for that, but you can find them when you want to have sex, was my thought. You're in our community when you're looking for something, but for decision makings, we can't be found. And that's one of the things that a lot of white men won't admit to is that their fear of that level of power that black people have, especially for those of us who are not afraid to exhibit it.
Powerful. How about your connections or the relationship of the organizations to Miami, if at all, is this the conversation is in the context of this Miami AIDS Memorials Project, which is thinking about how to think with community and memorial work in the context of Miami and beyond. curious if there are Miami connections that feel noteworthy.
I'm a graduate of Florida Memorial University, which is located in Miami Gardens, I think.
Powerful. How about you know, thinking about insights for future generations? I'm a different generation in learning a lot and really appreciating and respecting you in this conversation, and just curious any insights or words of wisdom you might share for people in the future who would potentially be watching this in an archival context or wanting to just hear your perspective on continuing to do the work into the future.
I say to them, to thine own self be true. You have to be true to the word and true to yourself in doing it. Because if you're waiting for somebody else to help you with it, they're not going to. And once you reach certain levels, people will get jealous of you, people will hurt you, people will do all kinds of things to stop you for no other reason than that you succeed. So toughen up, get your skin tough, because it's going to be a fight at some point down the road. But if you are true to yourself and to your cause, you can withstand
Well, thank you. I felt
that.
that. How do you want this work to be remembered?
I want this work to be ended. That's how I want it to be remembered, that it was ended.
Yeah. Because
Too many of us have suffered and died as a result of it. And if you can find something to prevent it, you can find a cure for it. That's the way I feel about it.
I hear that. How do you want to be remembered in terms of this work?
That I was here.
Yeah. How about art? Has that and culture, has that been a part of the community work that you all have put together?
Of course,
Your
of
example.
course. And at different times, one of my girlfriends who has the bird care, she does HIV and arts show every year. And so we participate in that with her. Uh,
Where's that?
that's on Ninth Avenue in St. Petersburg. It's called the Urban Drinkery.
Oh,
Yeah. She works with women. And since we work with men, because my target population is primarily men, Black men, trying to save their lives, trying to help them save themselves. It's difficult when you love someone more than they love themselves.
how about the future? What are your hopes, aspirations? You said ended for sure. Until
That
we
I can retire.
hear that, I hear that. How about for the work that Banyan will continue to do?
I'm working with some young people now who want to expand our services. I have limited our services, so I'm thinking that Banyan Tree might be around for a minute or two.
Oh,
I work with Octavius and his friend Stacy, and they have just been a joy to work with. I work with some wonderful young people.
amazing. Anything else that feels important to make sure we highlight and bring up in this context?
But this Christmas, I gave 5 young people gifts, and those gifts were memberships to the NAACP.
Hmm. And
That's who you're dealing with, that type of person.
yeah,
We have to teach our own.
yeah. Maybe just a last question. You've highlighted the importance of community at every turn. Uh, how is
That's
community?
all we got, man. That's all we got is each other.
Yeah.
Learning how to love each other is a difficult task because we don't know how to love ourselves.
Well, thank you for taking the time. If there's anything else you want to bring up, otherwise, it's been a powerful half an hour and really grateful for your time and efforts in this moment, but particularly for the decades of the work that you've done. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me and allowing me to talk about it all.
Powerful. I'm going to stop the recording. Thanks again.